High in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco, there's an ancient trail that winds through the scree and the silence of a national park. It leads to the summit of Mount Toubkal, the highest peak in North Africa. And for those who hike it, the air feels thinner, the stars feel closer, and the world feels impossibly wide. Louisa and Maren weren't thrill seekers. They were good friends in their prime and hopeful tour guides seeking experiences of the world. Women who believe that travel makes us better, kindness is more common than cruelty, and that the magic of the mountains always gives more than they take. But in December of 2018, an unthinkable tragedy took place. It shattered not only just their story, but the illusion of safety that so many of us carry when we set out into the wilds. I'm Mandolin, and this is Wild Curiosity. Hey guys, welcome back to episode 14 of Wild Curiosity. If you're new here, I'm glad you've joined us on this journey. Today, you have caught us at a kind of crazy episode. So, before we begin, I wanted to offer a quick content warning and a little bit of a clarification. So, the story I'm sharing today contains a discussion of graphic violence, extremist motivations, and the tragic, disturbing loss of two young travelers. So, a little bit more serious today, and just want to give a fair warning that I'll also be mentioning the Islamic State, but want to be very clear that the acts discussed in this episode were carried out by radicalized individuals who do not at all reflect the beliefs or practices of Islam as a whole. The overwhelming majority of Muslims are peaceful people. This story is, again, about extremists, and extremists exist in every religion, every country, and around every part of the world. So, Islam is a peaceful religion practiced by over a billion people around the world, and the actions of violent extremists must never be used to condemn entire communities. So, my aim in this is not to slander or offend anybody. Same goes for the country of Morocco. This case doesn't define the country, and I'm not here to drag a place that's full of kind people and culture and beauty through the dirt. My goal for this episode is just to talk about what happened and focus on honoring Louisa and Maren, their lives, their dreams, and the tragedy that unfolded in the mountain they set out to explore. So, yeah, just wanted to get that out of the way. All right, are we good? Last chance. Okay, let's begin. Before we get into the darker side of today's tale, I first want to just introduce the girls. Louisa Vesterager Jespersen, sorry if I am not saying that correctly, was 24 years old at the time. She was from a small town in the central region of Denmark, and Maren Ueland was 28 from a town on the southwestern coast of Norway. Both women were students at the University of Southeastern Norway, and they were studying outdoor recreation, nature guiding, and ecotourism, preparing for careers centered around leading others into nature and promoting cultural respect and adventure travel. They cared deeply about cultural exchange, environmental respect, and responsible travel. Friends and family described them as kind, curious, brave, and passionate about the outdoors. They loved hiking, traveling, and learning about new places and people. Their trip to Morocco in December 2018 was meant to be a personal adventure, a way to experience another part of the world and challenge themselves before finishing their studies. They had planned to spend about a month backpacking and hiking with the goal of summiting Mount Toubkal, the highest peak in North Africa. Shortly before setting out toward the mountains, Louisa posted publicly on Facebook saying, "Dear friends, I am going to Morocco in December. Any of you guys who's around by then, or any mountain friends who know something about Mount Toubkal." She really loved sharing the spirit of adventure with others and learning about new places. They were traveling cautiously, arranging local lodging, carrying their own gear, and using common trekking routes well known to visitors. In every way, they were doing what thousands of travelers had done before, trusting in the beauty of the mountains and in the kindness of people who lived among them. I believe it was Maren. I read she didn't like the materialism of Christmas. And so that was another reason why they chose to go during their break. So I thought that was pretty cool. Better way to spend it. I love spending the cold months in cool places. So they landed in Marrakesh, which is the capital of Morocco, if you didn't know, and made their way toward the small mountain village of Imlil, the main base for hikers aiming to climb Mount Toubkal. Honestly, I never had even really thought about these mountains. I've heard of the Atlas Mountains, but part of finding this story was cool because I got to learn a little bit about this mountain range, which sounds sick. Stretching over 600 miles across the country, the High Atlas cuts a dramatic line between the Atlantic coast and the Sahara Desert. Rising from this range is Mount Toubkal, standing at 13,671 feet. So pretty tall, 1,000 feet less than Mount Rainier. Toubkal isn't a isolated summit. It's surrounded by steep valleys, rugged passes, and remote Berber villages. Snow covers its upper slopes in the winter, and storms can roll in without warning, making conditions harsh, even for experienced hikers. Before it became known as a hub for trekking tourism in the 1990s, Imlil was a small, really quiet, slow moving agricultural village where people farmed for walnuts, apples, and barley on terraced hillsides. Life here was, and honestly, I just watched a YouTube video of somebody that did this. It still looks like that to me. It's very isolated and seems really quiet. Like, I don't think I saw a car. You just see like mules, and the houses really blend into the hillside a lot. Some of them I think are actually made out of the hillside. They all have the spread look and really blends in. Like, it looks like Star Wars kind of. The village has a few small guest houses, guiding services, and mule handlers for those carrying heavy loads. I wanted to talk a little bit about the trek. Back when Maren and Louisa did this trek, guides were not required. And actually, after this event happened with them, now you cannot do it without a local guide with you. So, this is what it says on this tour guide service website. The Mount Toubkal trek is a way to summit the iconic peak over a short 3-day break. The highest mountain in Morocco and North Africa, it's a tough but terrific peak, and also a fully guided one, starting with 1 day to acclimatize to the elevations of the High Atlas. The next 2 days are spent summiting and then descending Mount Toubkal. You're going to stay at the legendary refuge Les Mouflons en route to the top so that you can head for the summit at sunrise. Sounds cool. If you do not have 3 days, we also offer a shorter version enabling you to complete the climb in only 2 days by skipping the acclimatization day. There is also an option to add some extra days on with other natural adventures to the Urika Valley and Essaouira. I don't know. At the end of your tour. Probably butchered a lot of that. And then for the difficulty and terrain, it says this tour is rated strenuous and is suitable for those in excellent physical condition who have some trekking experience. However, no mountaineering or climbing experience is required, and the trek to Toubkal is non-technical but very demanding. The terrain's varied and the trails are often exposed to the sun. Their routes follow ancient Berber tracks. And Berber is a culture, a group of people in North Africa that are like, they call them desert dwellers. So they've been around for centuries and can survive in the desert. They don't live in any one place. So these are like old tracks that they use to get from place to place. It says that the Berber tracks can be high, steep, narrow, uneven, and rough underfoot. Some parts of the walk are above the snow line, and crampons will be provided if needed during the winter months. Whoa. Due to the lack of signposted trails, you will be supported by a local qualified mountain guide, as this is a very remote area. So when Louisa and Maren arrived in Imlil, this was something that tons of travelers were doing. They still do, probably will always do. It's been a very well-known trek for a very long time. So it was winter when they got there in the Atlas. It was cold at night, but still a popular time for trekkers hoping to summit Toubkal under clear skies. They set out from Imlil with plans to camp along the trail, which was a common choice at the time. You're just backpacking. But just beyond the last line of houses, as the slopes grow steeper and the paths grow quieter, their story would take a devastating turn. Okay, I now want to touch on Louisa and Maren's attackers. So they were three Moroccan men. Honestly, I cannot say their names, and I don't believe that they deserve to be named. So, these three dudes had a method of attack that was really deliberate. They had pledged their allegiance to the Islamic State just days before, recording a video swearing loyalty to one of the leaders, and set out specifically to kill foreigners to gain attention for their cause. Pretty sick and twisted. The first few days for the three men were marked by several abortive attacks. The day they arrived on the mountain, a Friday, they spotted a pair of tourists on bicycles and they took out their knives to target them, but they ultimately stepped back and got scared. According to the court files, that did not explain why. Can you imagine being those people that escaped that and like they probably still to this day don't know that it was them? On Saturday, they began tracking two different tourists, only to put the blades away again when they realized that the hikers were accompanied by guides. They also considered targeting a solo British hiker, but were either spooked by the villagers or dissuaded when they realized he was actually a Muslim. So they woke up the next morning, Sunday, with plans to set a trap high on the mountain trail using a narrow passage as a place to stage an ambush. That also did not work. Actually, to begin with, there was four guys, and after that last defected go at killing people, he decided he was fed up with trying and frightened, and he was leaving behind a wife who was pregnant with their third child, and he declared he would not continue. So he went back down the mountain and returned to Marrakesh and let his three other buddies stay up there to complete this. So Louisa and Maren planned to follow the standard Toubkal route, which typically includes an overnight at this refuge, which I think of it like a hostel. I'm not sure if you pay to stay there or not. I'm sure you do, like a small fee. But it's where all the travelers come together, and usually they probably have hot tea, food. I stayed at a few, they call them refugios in Patagonia. And this kind of sounds really similar to that. This mountain shelter is located at 3,200 meters. But instead of staying in a refuge, they decided to wild camp, which was common and legal at the time. On December 16th, the two women were seen hiking together and reportedly speaking with other travelers and locals. They set up camp in a quiet area near Cham Harouche, a small settlement along the trail made up of stone huts and a sacred Muslim shrine. It's about halfway between Imlil and the refuge. The spot they chose was remote but not isolated by Moroccan trekking standards. Their tent was visible from the trail and they were camped close to flowing water. They had gear, food, and were following a route used by international travelers for decades. Where they camped, we'll post pictures of it. It is literally this tiny shed is the only way I can describe it. And there's just this random guy that hikes up to that point every day and sells drinks to travelers. It's really small. I think there's two tent sites and it's remote, but it's basically they had summited that day. And so they were probably really exhausted and just wanted to lay down and go to sleep and decided not to keep going as it got dark down to the refuge and just were like, oh, we'll just camp here because we're backpacking. That's what we're here to do. By all accounts, they were prepared, experienced, and cautious. They had no reason to expect that danger was near. So that night, between December 16th and the early morning of the 17th, Louisa and Maren were brutally attacked by these three men while they slept. Okay, this is your warning to skip ahead here if you are sensitive to violence. The three remaining Moroccans discussed their division of labor. Two of them would kill the women, and one of them would film the attack on his phone. It was after midnight when they approached the women's campsite. One of them shouted, commanding the girls to come out. And as he reached for the zipper on the tent, he was actually startled because Louisa's hand was gripping for the tab from the other side. So he swung his knife at her hand and sliced it, setting off the violent struggle, which was punctuated by piercing screams. The men then took their knives and stabbed through the fabric of the tent towards the panicked figures inside. Louisa managed to break out of the tent and tried to run, but was subdued with multiple stab wounds. One of the guys aiming the camera pinned her head to the ground with his foot while another one of them attacked her with the knife. And they yelled, "This is revenge for our brothers," referring to a province in eastern Syria where the IS had sustained heavy losses. According to forensic reports, she actually suffered at least 23 stab wounds to her neck and body before she was beheaded. Another one of the guys found Maren, according to the court files. He had stabbed her in the chest, back, and arms and emerged from the tent carrying her head. Maren received at least 7 stab wounds. The men fled downhill toward Imlil, stopping at a stream to wash their clothes and shave their beards and get all the blood off of them. They also left their tent that they had bought specifically for this mission. They just took off without it. Once they were close enough to the village to have a strong cell connection, the guy that filmed it transmitted 2 recordings via telegram and the allegiance video and footage of the attack. Both were to be passed through intermediaries to the IS propaganda outlets, including its news agency. The bodies were discovered by a pair of French hikers, 2 women, who arrived at the blood-soaked campsite the next morning on December 17th. So then, within hours, the ordinary tranquil trail was off limits to tourists, clogged with emergency vehicles and investigators. Back in Norway, Maren's mom, who is an amateur nature photographer, was with her brother at a framing shop, and she told him she was nervous because she hadn't heard from Maren in 5 days, which is really unusual for their relationship. And he reassured her that Morocco was safe. That afternoon, the Norwegian television news reported that 2 women from Norway and Denmark had been found and killed in Morocco, but their names weren't disclosed yet. Maren's stepmother actually saw this report and called her husband, who was working that day at a farm, and said that the newscaster had mentioned 2 women from Norway and Denmark and asked where Maren's companion was from. He said that was concerning because she is Danish. The father called Maren's sister, Malin, who quickly relayed the news to their mother. At that moment, she was with her son, Maren's brother. Malin emphasized that the victims' identities were not yet known, but her mother was already beyond consolation. I feel it, she said. She hugged her son and told him she needed to leave. As she drove away, she dialed the emergency number of the Norwegian police, explaining that her daughter had been hiking where the victims were found. "Is it her who was killed in Morocco?" she asked. The police said they didn't know. Moments later, though, they called back and asked where she was, and she said she was in the car, and they told her, "You have to pull over." So, though the 3 attackers had transmitted their videos early on Monday, there was no sign of the recordings online for several days. The terror group's brand had evaluated the 2 submissions and found them deficient in almost every possible way. First video pledging their allegiance to the Islamic State flag, the Moroccans had crafted it from a shoddy t-shirt, and it was misshapen and not professional looking whatsoever. The men also sat in a dark, huddled room like teenagers, they thought, and mumbling their oaths, not in Arabic, but in a crude regional dialect. The video of the attack was even worse. The footage was super shaky and dark and was really difficult to make out in contrast to other elaborately staged executions that IS had been responsible for in Syria. And the fact that the men fled into the darkness was also at odds with the valiant image that they seek to project. That was all against them. But the biggest thing was because of them targeting these unarmed women. And it appears to be their greatest affront doing that. European officials who have pored over the terror group's propaganda archives have documented the deaths of 2,070 people in filmed executions between 2015 and 2017, mostly in Syria and Iraq. Only 3 of those killed were women, either stoned or shot for alleged offenses, but their faces hidden in accordance with Islamic strictures. So these 3 Moroccan men violated those religious tenets, and Louisa and Maren were killed in their underwear, their faces, necks, and shoulders often in the camera's view. Within 72 hours, the attackers were identified and arrested. A total of 24 individuals were eventually detained. King Mohammed the Sixth, which I think would be at the time, I don't know if he's still the king of Morocco, but he paid for the repatriation of the women's bodies and personally offered condolences to the family. I did see that both families asked for money for their grievances, but they did not receive it. The trial was held in the city of Saleh in 2019. The three main perpetrators were sentenced to death. Others received sentences ranging from 5 years to life for support roles. And they were the first people to be sentenced to death since 1993. That guy, the fourth guy that had traveled with them but abandoned the plan the night before and returned to Marrakesh, citing fear and second thoughts. Although he did not participate directly with the killings, he was later also arrested and convicted for aiding the group at the crime scene. He later died in prison in 2023, so just a couple years ago. Official reports say he died by suicide, though other sources have questioned the circumstances surrounding his death. There's rumors that he was actually killed in prison. One thing that kind of was extra sad was among the belongings that the authorities found at the site of the tent was a letter Maren had received from many years earlier. It was from a childhood friend, a French girl named Salome Girard, who was actually killed in the 2011 bombing of a cafe at a popular tourist spot in Marrakesh. Maren had actually carried this letter with her to the city where her friend died. And Maren's mother said she now realizes that her daughter was very sad about this for many years, but Maren didn't mention the letter before the trip. Her mother said, possibly because of the worry it would have caused. She didn't tell me because I would have been too afraid and I would have stopped her from going. And so after the arrests and the trial were over, Louisa and Maren's families shared messages with the world, messages that weren't of hatred, but of heartbreak and hope. Maren Ueland's mother, Irene, spoke to the Norwegian media and she urged the public not to respond to the tragedy with hate. She said, "We want to express that we do not want this tragic event to lead to fear or racism or hatred." She described Maren as a gentle soul who believed deeply in peace, connection, and understanding across cultures. Louisa's mother, Helly Peterson, also spoke out. She said Louisa had a heart of gold and had traveled to Morocco to fulfill a dream, to hike through the beauty of the Atlas Mountains. In her words, Louisa loved life. She loved adventure. She died doing what she loved most. Wanted Louisa and Maren to be remembered for their kindness, their adventurous spirits, and their dreams of a more connected world. Louisa and Maren's murders had a lasting ripple effect, not just in Morocco, but all around the world. Travel warnings were briefly elevated from Morocco, and many hiking groups and solo travelers canceled or rerouted their plans. The tragedy prompted conversations about solo travel, wilderness safety, and the risks that sometimes come with trusting the unknown. In response to the attack, Moroccan authorities implemented new safety regulations in the region. So, as of 2019, the year after the event took place, all hikers attempting to summit Mount Toubkal are now required to hire a licensed guide. This rule was put into place to better monitor movement through the trails and improve overall security for foreign visitors. Locals in Imlil and other mountain villages were devastated by what happened. Many felt the attack was not only an attack of terror, but a betrayal of the region's deeply held traditions of hospitality, safety, and respect for travelers. Louisa and Maren weren't naive. They were really careful girls. They were prepared. They followed a well traveled route and trusted in the same beauty and openness that draws so many of us to these wild places. Their story is not just about violence, though. It's about how even the most magical, meaningful journeys still carry a lot of risk. It's about the fine line between wonder and danger. And I think we all ride that fine line when we go out into the wilds. But more than anything, it's about two young women who believed in the good of the world. And while what happened to them is absolutely horrifying, it doesn't erase the light that they left behind. So here is your guys' call to action. Travel, but travel with intention. Learn about the places you visit, respect the local culture, and prepare well. Don't take safety for granted. But also, never stop exploring. Don't stop connecting. Don't let fear win or take away from experiencing life. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Wild Curiosity. If you guys like this episode or want to hear more like this, please comment below, send this to a friend, and follow me on social media. I'll put all of my handles and links below in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you guys. Send me an email, wildcuriositypodcast@gmail.com. And I'm looking forward to talking to all of you. I'll see you guys again in 2 weeks. We are going to be doing a shipwreck episode, actually, and a little bit of information on the Graveyard of the Pacific, which, if you didn't know, is off the coast of Washington and Oregon and is responsible for thousands and thousands of shipwrecks. It's a really notorious, scary place in the water to travel. And we'll be talking about a massive shipwreck, the worst and most deadly in our history. Until then, stay curious, always explore the wild, but make sure, even if you're tired, that you hike all the way to the refuge and just be careful. Okay, bye.